It wasn't too long ago that Japan ruled the 1000cc sports bike roost. Nowadays, it's the European manufacturers that top lap times and performance charts, but just as we thought the class was fading, two pioneers have returned in 2026 with, relatively speaking, bargain price tags. Can the Kawasaki ZX-10R and Suzuki's GSX-R1000R, looking resplendent in its 40th anniversary paint, still offer something viable? It's time we put them to the test against a tech-infested German.
Welcome to MCN. I'm Al Fagan, and this is the new BMW S1000RR. Now, this has been the benchmark, the yardstick for all its competitors for a very long time now. And it's not just us doing the talking and claiming these numbers, it's you guys. This has outsold its rivals, and it sells sort of 500, 600 every year, while some of its rivals struggle to get 100. And this is an inline-four, let's not forget. While others continue with evolution and development into V4s and cross-plane cranks, BMW is stuck with the inline-four. And it's not just a benchmark for its inline-four competitors, but also the Panigales and the more exotic bikes. Now with superbike evolution, it's become harder on the road has become harder on them. And let's be serious here, for a lot of guys, this bike and its rivals are just a little bit too much for the road. Now for 2026, this has spawned two softer, more affordable rivals in the Suzuki GSX-R1000R and the Kawasaki ZX-10R. Feast your eyes over this pair. We've got the Suzuki GSX-R1000R and we have the Kawasaki ZX-10R. Now the Kawasaki ZX-10R is £15,999. Just get your head around that for a second. That is almost half the price of a Panigale V4. Well, it's certainly less than half the price of a Panigale V4S. And it's not far off the half price of the Honda Fireblade, its other inline-four brother. Now the Suzuki is £17,599, so just a little over £1,000 more than the Kawasaki. The base BMW is 18.5 grand, just over. But when was the last time you saw a completely standard BMW? You go to the shop, the BMW salesman says, oh, how about these, how about these, how about these, and you spend a few grand more. Now, both of these bikes have had significant engine work to get through Euro 5+. The Suzuki makes 193 horsepower, the Kawasaki makes 203 horsepower. Now, this test is not just about lap times and everything else, or anything on track. If these were on track, the BMW would absolutely blow these away. I'd imagine 1.5, maybe 2 seconds quicker. This is all about everyday roadability on these superbikes. We're going to weigh them, fuel them, chuck them down a runway, and do everything else in between, and see which one of this trio is king of the road.
I mean, the first thing you notice on the GSX-R is the induction bark. It's that unmistakable GSX-R noise. I mean, there's no other word for it. And then mix that induction bark with this engine. It almost sounds broken sometimes. Very much like the BMW, you've got this variable valve trickery, which means you can use high gears. You don't have to be as fussy with gear changes. But unlike the BMW, the fueling is definitely not perfect on a Suzuki. Constant throttle is, well, it's a byproduct of Euro 5+. That's the only thing it can be. Suzuki have always been pioneers of decent fueling and decent throttle response, and you know, most of us like it in B mode. A mode is quite sharp, aggressive. You still get full power in B mode, but it's just a bit tamer. Reading in isolation, you think, yeah, suspension's fine. I like the gold tops. I like the sort of cylindrical phallus on the bottom of the forks. Looks factory. And you think, yeah, you know, it's just a 1000cc sports bike with, you know, racy suspension. But actually, when you ride it back to back with the other two, it's kind of weaknesses shine through. It's not the best at bump management, that's for sure. You know, it's nothing bad, and that's why I say ridden in isolation you think, yeah, it's okay. But whereas the BMW kind of magically flattens every road surface, and even the Kawasaki, as stiff as it is, it's plusher, it's more forgiving. This bike you can feel every single bump. And in terms of comfort, I think the GSX-R takes the comfort trophy. The seat is far nicer than the BMW, and it's not as awkward or as wristy as the Kawasaki. I mean, the screen is quite low. Wind protection, I don't think is peak, but this is, you know, that's minor things, minor infraction. And in terms of mechanical grip, the GSX-R takes that as well. I think when the bumps settle down and the bike settle down and it feels even on its wheels, this is the bike that feels like it's got the most grip. It inspires the most confidence. And although the BMW has that suspension and the carbon wheels, honestly, when, like I said, when the roads are smooth and you're not asking too much of the suspension, very little can match the GSX-R. It's definitely a bit more lethargic going from side to side compared to the BMW, but look, you know, that thing's got carbon wheels and costs almost double the price. So, but it does so, it's perfectly neutral. The steering, it feels, like I said, it inspires confidence so quickly with the sort of narrow bars and the way they're set up. Like I said, unmistakably GSX-R, but you have that feeling that the front wheel's in your hands, you're playing with this front end and you're in total control. As I said, the BMW has that variable timing trickery as well, but the execution just couldn't be further from each other. The BMW shouts refinement. It's smooth, it's easy, anyone can ride it. It's seamless. Whereas the Suzuki is the polar opposite. It's rough, it's raw. Look, mechanical is the operative word here when we're talking about the Suzuki. It's almost like you can feel every little bit of the machine working. You know, there's bits that vibrate and make different noises, and you can feel everything through the bars, which, you know, some might like, some might not. Some might prefer the kind of Mantequilla approach to the BMW. But it goes a long way to say that, as I said, the four testers these past couple of days, these past 3 days, all jumped on this and went, ah. I know some people might find this trivial, but, you know, for a bike to have the same dash, very much like the Kawasaki did for years, but for a bike to have the same dash for the past 10 years, and especially as it was gone for a while and then, you know, is respawned into this Euro 5 Plus version, you think Suzuki might do something about the dash. You know, this is the first thing you're treated to when you get in the cockpit, and it goes a long way to kind of set the tone. And yet here we are with this Casio tone bank arrangement. Now, what do you reckon of the 3 spokes? I think it's a little bit too 90s for me, a bit too TSW Venoms. But if, you know, like Suzuki could have put a new dash on the GSX-R, I think Kawasaki could have gone with the 21st century and put some 5 spokes or something else on. But anyway, let's not digress. Got this new dash, much nicer than the previous version. But similar to the Suzuki, you know, you could well be riding a bike from back in, you know, 2011-12 minus a dash. It just feels very Kawasaki. The levers are so far up, you end up with your fingers pointing to the moon. Now, the Kawasaki is definitely the most cramped of the 3. The sort of peg to seat ratio is quite short, so you end up with very bent knees. So taller riders, beware. There's a certain level of refinement for 2026. It just feels quite smooth and, you know, ridden at normal speeds, when you're not trying, when you're not chasing temps. The Kawasaki is smooth. but it is absolutely gutless below 9,000 RPM. You know, like I said, you could be riding along, just cruising, and you wouldn't think anything was different, or you didn't think anything was wrong. But it's not uncommon to see a milk float overtake a ZX-10 while it catches up with the revs and your throttle input. It has got a lovely blipper though, like a proper blipper, and in the fact that it actually blips. Most of the other pilots on the test throughout the past 3 days have said it's too much hard work. On the flip side, for me, yes, it is hard work. You have to work it. It's not as easy as the other two. Nowhere near. It does nothing is as fluid. But it's exciting. Like, there's a real element of excitement. And that's something the ZX-10 has lacked for a while when you compare it to others' rivals. That blipper. It steers nicely, but it doesn't feel, like I said, it doesn't feel as intuitive or as natural as the other two. It feels quite top heavy, particularly with a full fuel load. As I previously mentioned, there's a level of refinement, and you know, riding along, just pootling along, it feels quite smooth. Everything feels nice and refined, and the front brake lever is, for me, I love the sensation. It's a really progressive feeling, and some of the other pilots, in fact most of the other test riders, prefer the other bikes, and that instant bite you get with the BMW particularly. This is far more progressive. You don't, you know, it's smoother. You don't get that kind of instant grab, which I guess some people like for a bit of confidence. But that feeling translates to the suspension as well. As I said, this is, although firmer, this is a nicer ride than Suzuki, just because it controls the whole stroke better. The gearing is also quite long, which exaggerates its kind of two-stroke nature. But then again, at 9 grand, if I could show you on the road legally, all hell lets loose and you're in for a wild ride. Plenty of revs. It does have that innate Kawasaki instability, which again, is nothing dangerous, but you just get that feeling that the bars start dancing, it sits on its arse a bit, the front goes light, and you kind of get that twitchy sensation, which again, I don't mind it. Like the engine's sporty nature, I like that bit of edge, you know. If all superbikes were as refined and as easy to ride as a BMW, the world would be a boring place. It's also the thirstiest. This took 12.5 litres. We all did 122 miles. This took 12.5 litres. The BMW took 11.7, and the Suzuki took pretty much bang on 12. So it's quite a significant amount for a, you know, for a relatively small journey. Very much like the Suzuki in many ways. Take away the dash, take away the fork tops, it feels like I could be riding the Superstock bike that I raced in 2011. Everything feels very, very similar. Even the noise, you know, there's not as much mid-range obviously, and you know, dynamically they behave quite differently, but in terms of feel, cockpit, I mean the screen's higher thankfully, but it's all very, very similar, and that's what, 15 years ago? Oh, that blipper, talk to me. Put it like this, not everyone can get finance in the first place. Not everyone can afford 20, 25, 30 grand anyway. For 15,999 quid, you've got a real hooligan option in this. And honestly, right mate? And honestly, you won't be disappointed. If this was the only superbike option, you will not be disappointed. Is it harder work? Yes. Is it a bit of a pain in the arse? Yes. Is it slower? A little bit. Is it more fun? Absolutely. This is a proper hooligan's bike. BMW has been a bastion of comfort and joy for so many years now. It combines the sort of everyday road manners, usability and comfort with unyielding speed and a decent lap time on the track as well. It probably is, well, no, in fact, it is definitely the most flexible and versatile bike, not only in this group, but of all the thousands. I mean, look, this model here is over £28,000. When you compare it to the Suzuki, which is 17.5, and the Kawasaki at just under 16, you know, it's insane. But the base model is so good. Sure, these carbon wheels help, but the base model is so good. Like I said, it kind of reads the road with telepathic ease. It does everything so easily. As I said, the base model is 18.5 grand, and yet you can buy a bike using the base model and spec it up to 28, just over 28 grand. So BMW are the only manufacturer to do this. Sure, I mean, Ducati might do the same, but they probably kind of whack all the bits on and then sell it as a special edition model or something, but it's very unique in that sense. And it's almost impossible to fault dynamically. The engine is the strongest. I mean, they claim a lot of horsepower. We haven't put it on the dyno yet, I don't think. But they claim a lot of horsepower, and it feels like it's the most. There is power everywhere. It's definitely got the widest spread of power, the biggest user parameters here, and that is all down to the variable valve timing. I mean, you could leave it in 6th gear, and apart from pulling away when you need to, you just leave it in 6th gear, ride it like a scooter, because it's got the ability to just pull wherever it is on the rev range, wherever the dash lies on the rev range. So, welcome to the cockpit of the BMW S1000RR. You've got this lovely big screen, which definitely helps in terms of wind protection. It's not the comfiest, however. The seat is definitely not the comfiest. In fact, it's the most uncomfortable of the three. It feels the most modern. Oh, got a bit of gravel in, Nige. It feels the most modern though. I mean, look, I might have mentioned it before, I don't know, but given BMW's class, I mean, it just kind of ruins it with all these anodized blue bits. But that's just a personal opinion. I know a lot of people feel the same. But yeah, it's a step above the other two in terms of fixtures and fittings and finish and bits and bobs, trinkets. Sure, as I said, the carbon wheels do make a difference, but the base model is so good, regardless of whether you've got carbon wheels fitted. The chassis is just sublime. It kind of, some would argue it's boring because it does everything so well, this bike. But there's enough in the motor, and there's enough kind of attitude and fun factor embedded in this bike to make it not boring. However, it's not without its faults though. It's quite vibey. All four of the testers over the last 3 days said the same thing. Even long journeys, short journeys, everything in between. There's quite a vibey sensation from the bars. I don't think these grips help. They're quite stiff, hard, thin, wafer thin. But of course you need them for the heated grips, which of course you need on a superbike. It's also very tall, so those vertically challenged might find it a bit tricky, you know, manoeuvring the bike around slower speed, and it's got an awful steering lock. But do not let that detract you from what is an almost faultless motorbike, if you can afford it. The engine really is the centerpiece of this bike, but the way it handles and the way it steers and the way you have utter control from, you know, 0 degrees of leaning angle right over to 55, 60 if your name's Top Rat, but everything about it is controlled. Everything about it feels like you're in control, and that's unmatched, certainly in this trio. Whereas the others, you think about having to steer, and you think about various bits of handling and how to attack a corner. There's none of that with this bike. It just, like I said, it's almost telepathic in its reading of the road. I mean, obviously, this is the only bike of the three to have the semi-active suspension, and the BMW somehow manages to flatten any road surface. No matter how gnarly, no matter how bumpy, it has this supernatural ability to mask any surface, which kind of sets the whole tone up for the ride, really. The engine's smooth, the chassis smooth, the fueling is smooth. It's smooth. While the other two, particularly the Suzuki, you get your teeth battered to bits on rougher roads. The BMW just smooths the whole lot out.
Well, we spent 3 days riding these three beauties. We've done everything except the track. And I really wanted these two to come out on top, the underdogs, you could say. But John Urry, fellow tester, made a point. He said, what's the point of these? Are these even irrelevant anymore? Now, don't get me wrong, it's really good to see two new superbikes in the stable for 2026, but they won't sell loads. I mean, the Suzuki kind of pipped the hype mode on launch. The colours, the different colours are kind of more appealing to a lot of people. But like I said, they're not going to sell loads. They're not even racing. Kawasaki now uses its Bimotor arm of the company to go racing. So you have to kind of question the relevance. I don't personally. I think as a sports bike nut, and most of us here, they're here for a good reason. And they do offer, believe it or not, they do offer something completely different. So in third place is the Kawasaki. It's just too much hard work. It's exciting, sure, and I kind of like that from a purely subjective point of view. I kind of like that. I love it works you hard. You've got to work it hard. You've got to think about it. You've got to think about gears. You've got to kind of put more effort in on the road than these two. But ridden against these two, it's kind of deficiencies and negatives shine through. It's cheap, sure, $15,999. It almost makes sense. But the way we buy bikes nowadays with finance and PCP and everything else, really a few grand here or there doesn't make much difference to most people. But the fact you can get a brand new superbike capable of doing stupid miles an hour and the rest of it to back it up, I think is a great option. You could well be in 2011 until you see the dashboard, until you see this new dash. You could well be in 2011 because yes, the riding position is slightly more comfy than previous models and the screen is slightly higher, but it's green, it has the same key, this very similar switchgear. It's got cruise control, which the Suzuki hasn't, but cruise control matters little when you have to rev it as hard as this thing. It's like I said, it's like a two-stroke. There's absolutely nothing at the bottom, no mid-range, and then about 8,000–9,000 it just goes whoomtish and to the moon. Which, like I said, it's exciting, but on the road it makes for extremely hard work. The same goes for the chassis. It's kind of a bizarre sensation where it's quite rear bias, and it doesn't feel as neutral or as intuitive as the other two. You kind of have to really think about your body position and the way you sort of set yourself up for a corner, whereas the other two kind of almost autopilot mode. You can just get on and ride them and they'll take you for a ride. Whereas the Kawasaki, you kind of have to think about it a little bit more. I will say though, the suspension is really nice and plush compared to the Suzuki. For road stuff, its bump management and the way it controls itself over bumps is far better than the Suzuki. Same goes for the brakes, that kind of progressive nature. A lot of the testers on this test didn't like the fact there was no initial bite, but you've got that, it's a really nice progressive action through the lever. And there is enough power. I mean, you've got, Brembo M50, so, and a Brembo Master Cylinder. So it all adds up to, like I said, decent stopping power, but it's the way you can control that braking that's it's sort of impressive me. So in terms of runway stuff, the Kawasaki is the only bike that hasn't got variable valve trickery like the other two have. And on the runway, it really suffered. The 0–60 time was considerably, when we're talking about like half a second, that is considerably more than the other two. And it was also lacking top speed when you compare to the other two as well, 4 miles an hour down. On track, I think the Suzuki may be sort of 1.5–2 seconds off the BMW. I think the Kawasaki would be a lot more. maybe even 2.5 seconds. So look, I don't want to hate on this bike because I'm so pleased Kawasaki brought this back. It looks great. It's 15,999, but like I said, when you compare it to the other two, just haven't quite got it. Now, second place, the Suzuki, the bike that BMW developed their original S1000RR on, the K5 Suzuki. Again, similar to the Kawasaki, you get on the Suzuki and think, apart from that Casio kind of Nokia dashboard, you could well be riding a K5, K6. The riding position, the induction noise, the mirrors, the kind of everything about it is very Suzuki. It even smells Suzuki. Now, I'm not going to mention that exhaust, okay? I think the internet has had enough of that exhaust. I'll let you figure the looks out yourself, although I did just mention it. But this was a kind of test rider's favourite. All 4 of the test riders on this test loved it. Loved jumping on it, getting back on it and going, oh, it's just like putting on an old set of slippers or, you know, an old friend. It's just, it just rewards you by welcoming you in and kind of, there's no nonsense, there's no kind of weirdness, you just get on it. And I've got to say, I can't tell the difference between the old engine and the new engine. Although there's an extreme amount of work gone into the inside of the engine, honestly, I can't tell the difference. It makes the same noise, it makes the same rattly noise. You almost feel like sometimes it's broken. You know, the sort of rattle and the raucous engine noise itself on top of the induction noise. It is a really involving sensation. It kind of makes it feel faster than it actually is as well. Now, interestingly, both of the Suzuki and the Kawasaki have exactly the same tyres. They both boast Bridgestone RS12s, but the Suzuki uses the tyres, or it manages to extract the best from the tyres, whereas the Kawasaki just feels a bit looser. And that, I think, is purely down to the mechanical grip of the chassis. And in terms of the runway, the Suzuki managed the best 0 to 60 time, although it was fractionally quicker. I think it was 2/100ths of a second quicker than the BMW. And it also matched its top speed. Now, I didn't do the launch of the GSX-R1000, but I can tell you now, as I said, I think it'd be quicker than the Kawasaki, 1.5 seconds off the BMW, but I think it'd be really good fun. And it's a cheap track bike. It's, like I said, it's half the price of your normal Panigales, Hondas, and significantly less than the BMW. So, which brings me on to the BMW.
Right, BMW, bizarrely, I think it's 3.2 seconds they claim on the website for the 0 to 60 figures for this bike. I just think it's ludicrously low. Right.
It's really difficult not to rave about this bike. Regardless of the price, these are the 3 more affordable inline-four superbikes in 2026. It just does everything better. It brakes better, it stops better, it goes better. Everything about it is better. I wouldn't say the comfort is as good as the seat. Certainly isn't as good as or as comfy as the Suzuki. It's quite tall, but yeah, overall, it ticks every single box in comparison with these two. And that isn't because of the M-Pack, and that isn't because of the carbon wheels. It's because the base of this bike is so damn good. Like I said, it still handles amazingly well without the carbon wheels. It still stops amazingly well without the carbon wheels. It still goes amazingly well without all the anodized blue bits. And, you know, at 18.5 grand, it's only a grand more than this. So, yes, it is more affordable. It is an option. I'm so pleased these are here. Like I said, I'm so pleased we have more options in 2026. And they are viable options. However, this is king of the road still.